on this episode of Jeff Does Vegas.
There's no rule that says that you're not allowed to fly over pretty places when you're doing a discovery flight. You can take off and go over Lake Mead, check out the Hoover Dam, enjoy the freedom of flight, get a feel for what it is to be at the controls of the aircraft. But yeah, you're allowed to look out the window and see some pretty cool stuff.
Las Vegas. It's more than just a city. It's a feeling. It's that feeling of excitement when you spot the lights of the strip out the airplane window. It's that feeling of awe as you stroll down the boulevard, taking in the sights and sounds. And it's that feeling of satisfaction, knowing that you're in the greatest city in the world. Over 42 million people from around the world share that feeling every year. And I'm one of them. Taking you to the world-famous Vegas Strip and beyond, my name is Jeff, and this is Jeff Does Vegas. Hey there, and welcome to episode number 118 of Jeff Does Vegas. Before we get rolling on this episode of the show, I just want to take a second to thank everyone for checking out the last episode, where I took a deep dive into the world of travel safety. It's been a crazy couple of years, and a lot of folks haven't had much of a chance to travel, so people are a little out of practice when it comes to the little things that they can do to stay safe while on vacation. We covered pre-travel safety, hotel security, crime avoidance, and much more. If you haven't listened as of yet, jump into the archives at jeffdoesvegas.com or search out episode number 117, Better Safe Than Sorry, on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, here we go. On to the show. Anyone who knows me well knows that I am a massive airplane nerd. I love flying and everything to do with flying. Over the course of my life, I've had the opportunity to do some really cool aviation-related stuff, from logging several hours in a Cessna in an attempt to get my pilot's license, to riding the flight deck jump seat in an airliner, to flying a full-motion Boeing 737 simulator, to visiting aviation museums all over the world. If you've ever wanted to try your hands at the controls of an airplane and see some unique sights while doing it, my guest for this episode of the podcast is the guy you need to talk to. Paul Sallach is the founder and president of All In Aviation, a unique Las Vegas-based flight school that offers the ultimate in hands-on training. Book a lesson with All In, and not only will you find yourself behind the yoke of one of their 17 aircraft, but you'll be doing it while cruising over spots like Hoover Dam, Lake Mead, and the Vegas Strip. Paul and I talked about what got him into flying, what sparked the move to Las Vegas, and what sets All In Aviation apart from other flight schools. Please enjoy my conversation with Paul Sallach.
I wish that I had some like big family connection story to tell you that lit the fire, but mine was actually sort of the complete opposite. My dad and both of my grandfathers were pastors, and I didn't want to be a pastor. I'm still religious, but I didn't want to have that as a job. So I thought the furthest thing that I can get away from being a pastor is to be probably at flight level 350. So that was sort of what caused me to go explore. And I explored the various universities that specialize that, and found North Dakota, and went there having never been in other than one plane when I was 6 years old. So I hoped that I liked it, and it turned out that I loved it. So yeah, it's a weird story, but that's my background.
That is kind of a different story from the usual entry into the world of aviation. Pretty much every aviation nerd that I know of, myself included, had some sort of experience as a child, right? I mean, for me, it was my grandfather who was really into airplanes and got me really into airplanes. Other stories I've heard, it's people that as a kid, they went to the airport and watched airplanes land or whatever. But you did not have that at all.
No, I really didn't. I just thought it would be really cool to travel around. We didn't really travel much in my family. I'm the oldest of 7, so it was really, if we were going to load up in the van, that was a long road trip. So I had the allure of just like going places and having some freedom. So if that's the connection, it really didn't have too much to do with, the passion for aviation, more so just to be able to go see places.
And you mentioned attending the University of North Dakota, and a lot of people probably don't necessarily think of massive aviation training hub when they think of Grand Forks, North Dakota, but it really is one of the best flight schools and aviation training programs in the U.S., North America, if not the world.
I would say that I had no idea either. And as I explored aviation sort of universities, there's the Daytona Beach Embry-Riddle, which sort of is very alluring for a 17-year-old kid looking to go to college. But then you look at sort of those top three, and you learn North Dakota is right there, and the cost is a fraction of what it is to live in Daytona Beach. So that was what led me in that path. Being that I was born and raised in Canada, I wasn't as afraid of the cold weather as some might be. But North Dakota, it's really amazing how many friends and connections and how big of an aviation program they have.
They say you never forget your first. And I remember the very first time that I found myself behind the controls of a small airplane. It was an absolutely amazing feeling. It was just like, wow, I'm actually doing this. Do you remember your first time you got in a plane and taxied out there and took off, and what was that like for you?
I do. I was like, oh my God, I better like this. Like, I moved all the way to North Dakota. I got student loans out the yin yang. Like, I am in it, and this better turn out to be good. And it was just so much fun. The nice thing about North Dakota is everything is north, south, east, west. So it's very hard to lose your spatial or your situational awareness. So it after the one flight, I was like, I didn't get lost. I knew where I was going, and it was natural. It was really a lot of fun. So the passion, the flame was lit at that point.
When I was taking my private pilot's license, which, by the way, I never actually finished because it just got way too expensive for me. But when I was in the process of doing mine, I had a couple of those bizarre experiences, a slightly mildly terrifying experience where my flight instructor really kind of put me through the ringer, and he snapped at me a couple of times, don't touch that kind of thing. Did you have any of those kinds of experiences during your training? Anything that really kind of freaked you out?
When I got to the point where I did my first spin flight, where as a flight instructor, you have to do spins to prove to the FAA that you can control an airplane when it becomes out of control. We did the spins. I passed that just fine. My instructor was like, "Hey, do you want to do some aerobatics?" So I said, "Sure." I mean, we're in the aerobatic airplane. Let's do it. And after we did a loop, he goes, "Well, our engine just died." And I was like, oh, whatever. This is something that you train for almost every day, and it's a simulation. And he's like, no. The engine seriously just died. So he declared an emergency. And when you're doing aerobatics, you're actually close enough to the airport that you because you can't take much fuel. You only have enough fuel to probably fly for 30 minutes. So you sort of take off, you go fly, do loops, do all your stuff, do your spins, and then come back and have enough of a reserve. And he literally just glided it into the runway, and fire trucks greeted us on the runway. So that was sort of, if there was a scary moment, that was it. But it was really unscary because we had been training for it our whole time.
You always hear the stories from people after they finish their flight school and their flight training about the first jobs that they get. And there's a lot of kind of bizarre ones out there, people that'll fly for funeral homes, moving around bodies, or up north, working in the bush, flying and landing in these weird places. What was your first aviation related gig after you finished your training? So
my first job was actually to work for the university. That was a pretty natural path, right? You'd get all your certificates and your ratings. And that was really like a 2-year interview process, if you want to call it that, because the university is watching how you progress and how you are as a pilot. And They would hire, half of the students basically every year to groom the next batch of pilots. But when I finally got to the point where I was ready to go get a real job, outside of the nest of the university, the World Trade Centers came crumbling down, and there was no jobs to be had in commercial aviation. So it was like this dream that I had of going and flying for Delta all over the world and making big money, sort of vanished. Airlines were cutting pay. They laid off a ton of the workforce. The general public was afraid to fly. Countries were going to war, right? It really wasn't, it was not a good time to be getting into aviation. So my sort of path was, it was forced a different direction. And down the road from Grand Forks, North Dakota, they make Cirrus aircraft. And at the time, nobody had ever heard of them. It was sort of, this new up and coming company. And they were looking for flight instructors. So I went and applied for a job as a flight instructor in a setting that wasn't so institutional. It was a little more, it was a little more glamorous because you were flying brand new airplanes, delivering them to customers. So that was sort of what got me on the path that I'm on now. And I've really never looked back, to be honest with you.
And I would imagine that getting in as a flight instructor with a company like Cirrus, where, as you say, you're delivering to new customers of the aircraft, it's a little bit different than, say, being a flight instructor at a flight college or at a flying school, because you're teaching people to just fly that aircraft. It's not like you're teaching brand new people. I mean, I know when I was doing my stuff, I kind of felt bad for some of the flight instructors and some of the people that were getting in. Like, they were taking their lives into their own hands with these people.
Yeah. No, and I mean, the same could be true for somebody that bought their own airplane. Sometimes they might be a little, more scary to get in the plane with, because, sometimes having more money than brains isn't the best combination. But, I learned that, sitting, most pilots, like if you want to fly commercially, you want to fly corporate, your customers sit behind you, right? You're flying them somewhere and your job is to take them there. What was unique about delivering brand new airplanes is that my customer, I was just sitting shoulder to shoulder to, and these guys are business people. They're attorneys, they're car dealers, they're, you name it. There's an array of them. And I was, sort of the respected individual in the cockpit that knew what they were doing and earned a lot of trust and a lot of, sort of relationships formed, just because of my knowledge that I was able to help them become better aviators. So it was kind of a fun realization that some young kid fresh out of college can teach, a high-powered attorney how to fly an airplane, and then they come to you for every question that they ever have. So it's really kind of a fun role to have.
It's kind of funny that you bring up the whole more money than brains thing, because I remember thinking that when I was doing my ground school. My class ran the gamut of people who were there to seriously learn how to fly a plane because they had ambitions to get into the commercial aviation industry, to people like myself who were doing it casually as sort of a bucket list item, to the folks who it felt like they just kind of woke up that day and said, you know what I want to do today? I want to learn how to fly a plane.
Yeah. But I will say the people that they can afford it, I call dollars, certificates of appreciation. They are normally people that have earned that ability. They're typically, I say that they jokingly have no brains, but they really actually are some of the smartest people that you can ever come across. But I guess the motivation is different. So it does run the gamut, and I would say that the fun ones are the ones that are those, the entrepreneurial kind of people that that scatter all over the place, and you end up picking up a lot of stuff that you won't normally get out of somebody that's just wanting to know how to do a traffic pattern.
Right. So let's talk about you making your way to Las Vegas. You've graduated out of UND. You're working for Cirrus. What is it that took you to Las Vegas?
Sure. So By the time that I was 2008 at this point, I had progressed through various roles at Cirrus, demo pilot and marketing pilot and stuff like that. Always wanted to get into sales. And I was still a fairly young person, and it was a difficult role to get as a young individual. So I got overlooked for a couple opportunities that had come up to external candidates. And then at that point, the recession was starting to come, right? 08, 09. And there was an opportunity to sell pre-owned aircraft, primarily Cirrus airplanes. So I had lots of relationships with owners that would probably one day want to sell their planes, and I could make a commission off of those sales and basically be a real estate agent for an airplane. But I had to leave working for Cirrus. I had to do it as an independent contractor. So controlling my own destiny is really what it boiled down to. I didn't want to be let go in the recession because new aircraft sales were really starting to hurt. Everything was starting to hurt bad for the economy. And I wanted to be able to say, you know what, I'm going to go do this on my own, at my own will. So that's what I did. Moved out to Vegas to sell pre-owned airplanes and have been doing it ever since.
After the break, Paul lets us in on the future of All In Aviation and shares with us his reason for initially founding the company. That's next on Jeff Does Vegas. So then let's talk All In Aviation. This is your baby. This is your business. What was it that spurred you on to expand beyond just selling pre-owned aircraft and getting into all the other areas that All In Aviation is involved with?
So there's 2 million people that live in Las Vegas, probably a few more now. And there was really nobody here in town that was focusing on Cirrus specifically. There's always a lot of flight schools that will have old, inexpensive airplanes to cater to the masses. But I would be here selling a, let's just call it a $500,000 airplane, pre-owned airplane. And that person needed some after sales support, i.e. flight instructions, so that they were safe in their airplane. And there was nobody here to just take that customer. I, of course, was here, but if somebody wants to buy an airplane, they kind of want the sales guy to return their phone call. And if you're in the air teaching the last guy that you sold the airplane how to fly his plane for the next 2-3 days, it's hard to respond to the phone calls that are coming in for the next sale. So it was more so, conceived to help just support sales. I needed sort of a flight school to support sales. And then secondarily, a lot of times people would call me and say, hey, I see you have this airplane for sale. I'm in town in Las Vegas and I just want to fly a Cirrus. I want to go over the Grand Canyon. I want to, experience some of the beauties that we have right here. And of course, I can't do that with somebody's airplane that I'm trying to sell. I knew that I needed to have an airplane, have a couple flight instructors. And that was sort of the original idea, was cater to transient customers and take care of those local people that needed some training after they bought a plane. And it's blown up. I mean, we now have 17 airplanes. We've got 13 flight instructors. So it's a pretty good size flight school by comparison. And all of the stuff that we have is late model, Garmin equipped, glass panels, air conditioning. These are all nice airplanes. So we don't compete with the rest of the flight schools that are a race to the bottom. We are sort of delivering a premium experience and a premium product.
It's interesting that you mentioned that race to the bottom, because I think that is unfortunately a big part of a lot of flight training schools. In my own limited experience and research that I did when I was going around, I looked at a few different places, and it always seemed like they were trying to cut corners and cut costs, maybe not necessarily in safety, but just in various parts. And it just kind of gave you that feeling of, geez, I don't know.
100%. Yeah. I mean, somebody rolls into the parking lot wanting to learn how to fly on their Range Rover. The last thing that they want to do is walk outside and see that, the seat is held together by duct tape. And that's sort of like the normal, flight school that has 40, 50-year-old airplanes. So we just cater to the guy that wants to maybe one day buy an airplane. And if everybody else wants to pay a premium for a premium product, nice airplanes, standardized instructors, world-class facilities, we're the only game in town. So you're going to find us, and we're going to deliver, an experience unlike any other, for sure in town, but I think really kind of all over the country, to be honest with you.
You guys offer something that you call destination training, which I think is just so cool. I mean, when I did my flight training, it was north of Edmonton, Alberta, Canada, and we took off from the little city center airport in downtown Edmonton. We followed the highway west out to the practice area, which was this area out over a farmer's field, and just boring, nothing exciting about any of it. Meanwhile, you've got this training that's going on over some of the most scenic areas of the United States, which is just amazing.
Yeah. I mean, you told me earlier, why did you stop flight training? Because you couldn't see yourself doing anything with it, right? Because most schools take off, fly around in a circle, and never leave the same airport that they originated from, with the small exception of like the one time that you're regulatorily required to do so. So I think attrition happens as a result, where people just sort of fizzle out because it's not what they envisioned. What most people envision is what I envisioned when I was a kid, right? I want to go somewhere. I want to see something. I want to do something. I want to learn while I'm doing it. So we'll go places like Sedona for lunch. So we're doing a flight lesson that way, doing a flight lesson on the way home, actually make it into an experience. Go to Los Angeles, go down to Havasu, go up to, Zion National Park, go to these places that once you become a pilot, what do you want to do with that pilot license? You probably want to go to these kind of places. So actually training with sort of your end goal in mind is the means with which we get there is sort of our main focus.
And it should be noted, too, that if somebody wants to essentially walk in off the street with you guys and do a familiarization flight or a sightseeing flight, I mean, that's something that you guys offer. That's something that they can do with you.
Absolutely. Yeah, there's no rule that says that you're not allowed to fly over pretty places when you're doing a discovery flight. You can take off and go over Lake Mead, check out the Hoover Dam, enjoy the freedom of flight, get a feel for what it is to be at the controls of the aircraft. But yeah, you're allowed to look out the window and see some pretty cool stuff. And that is definitely, we do a lot of that, right? When people want to combine, hey, I want to fly the new $1 million Cirrus and I want to go to the Grand Canyon. I've always wanted to, put this in my logbook, and you're going to be sitting next to a flight instructor that knows the airspace, that knows the airplane. He's going to teach you how to do it. And you're going to land and have that sort of pinnacle moment and put it in your logbook. And I think be very, very proud to go home and tell your friends what you did. And you're not sitting in the back pointing to where the cool stuff is. You're piloting the aircraft to take you over these cool places. And that's what makes us a little bit different.
You've got 17 planes in your fleet and all relatively new late model aircraft, which, as we touched on before, set you guys apart from a lot of places out there that are operating airplanes that are 20, 30, even 40 years old. And I took a look at your website. There's some really awesome stuff in your hangar that it would be great for anybody, and not just an aviation enthusiast, but for anybody to be able to go see the sights and not just see the sights, but actually get their hands on the controls and give it a go.
Yep. So our low cost option is our 172s. They're Cessna 172s, but what's different about ours is that they're all hangared, they're all service center maintained, they're all G1000, they're all, detailed after every flight. These are nicer 172s. The rest of the fleet is all Cirrus, and every one of the Cirruses has air conditioning as standard. If you're familiar, maybe your listeners are not, but they all come equipped with a parachute for the whole aircraft. So if safety is a concern for some, they'll pay a premium to have that parachute option. But we have different models that go different speeds and carry different amounts of weight. So it depends on what what ultimately you're looking to accomplish. But yeah, you're flying a $1 million airplane for rent. So it's kind of, I liken it somewhat to, people that come to Vegas and they rent a Lamborghini to drive up and down the strip. They just want to do it and try it on. That's a little bit of what we're doing in that regard. But those people do have a unique interest in aviation, right? Most people don't just do it. They don't stumble into it. They've always wanted to fly an airplane. They've always wanted to give it a go. So they're doing it in the best.
So what's next for All In Aviation? I mean, you guys have done some expansion over the last couple of years. You've added some facilities. What's next for you guys? What's in the future?
We'll probably add a few more airplanes. What we currently rely on is a maintenance partner that does all of our maintenance for us. So I think that we'll probably try to expand into that space, is to be able to not just do the sales and the training and the rental, but also to maintain the airplanes. So that's where I think I'm going to spend a lot of my focus. But it's if it ain't broke, don't fix it. I would say that in a lot of ways we're doing some fun stuff. Customers love it, so we're going to tweak it a little bit, but we're not going to totally reinvent the wheel. We'll keep the fleet modern. We'll keep our instructors very standardized and very specialized, I guess, and just make sure that we're differentiating ourselves from everybody else.
If people want to pay All In Aviation a visit, either in person or virtually, online or with social media, how can they go about doing that?
Yep. So our main new location that opened in 2020, in the middle of COVID, right, where we've got 26 hangars here, brand new 30,000 square foot main facility, is at the Henderson Executive Airport. That is just from the Las Vegas Strip. It's probably like a 12 to 15 minute Uber ride if that's how you're getting around town. But it gets you away from all the airline madness. And it's the private airport on the south side of town. We do have a North Las Vegas location. I would say that it's not as well suited for a transient person that's coming from out of town, just because we don't have the beautiful facilities that we do here. But we do have two locations. So that's something to highlight. We're at allinaviation.com is our website. And we're both Facebook and Instagram for those social channels under All In Aviation.
Excellent stuff. Paul, thank you so much for taking time to jump on and have a conversation with me here today. Really do appreciate it. And next time I'm in Vegas, I'm going to swing around. You're going to help me embrace my inner aviation nerd.
I'd love to show you around, take you flying. Let's get you in the air and show you what this beautiful city is all about. So thank you for taking the time to visit with us. And hope to see you in person here.
Once again, if you want to learn more about Paul and the team at All In Aviation, jump on their website at allinaviation.com or like them on Facebook at All In Aviation. And if you want some very cool pics from some of their flights, follow them on Instagram at All In Aviation. Of course, you can find all these links in the show notes at jeffdoesvegas.com. And that wraps up another episode of Jeff Does Vegas. If you've got feedback on this episode of the show, or any other episode for that matter, or you've got suggestions and ideas for topics you'd like me to cover on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to me via Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Jeff Does Vegas, or drop me an email directly at jeff@jeffdoesvegas.com. In the meantime, thank you so much for checking out the show. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts so you'll know the moment new episodes are available. And don't forget to visit jeffdoesvegas.com for past episodes and show notes. My name is Jeff, and this has been Jeff Does Vegas, a Walker New Media production.